I don't know if you caught it, but last week on This Morning, a British chat show, the Arcturian starseed made her debut. And I had a jaw-dropping moment and said out loud to my daughter, I think we're here. I think we got to this place, which is a little shocking for my human, right? For us, it's the opposite. We're shocked when the mainstream collective starts to talk about what we've been exposed to for a long time, you know?
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another fabulous episode of First Contact. Today on the show, we have Eesha Love. Now, Eesha is a metaphysician. She calls herself the mama of multidimensionality. How fun. And she's also the founder of Multidimensional You. And, of course, as all of our guests on the show, she's got a wild galactic story that started off her journey. So tell us all about that, Eesha. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here, Eesha. And all right, I will bring everybody on this wild ride of my awakening that began in 2008. And I'll give a little bit more context. So my origin story, my birth story, my parents, my mom especially leveled with me when everything went galactic, that they could never explain my conception. It was like completely blindsided them. They couldn't do the math on it. My dad called me Starshine. By 18, 19 in college, I was kind of looking around going like, did I get off on the wrong stop on the intergalactic tramway? Because I don't think I was supposed to be here. So there were some of those things earlier in life, right? Like when I was a kid, baby animals, injured animals would always show up for me to nurture and heal, that type of stuff, okay? But otherwise, I lived a conventional life. Now, I was born near the 10th Stargate over in the Middle East. My parents were working overseas in Iran at the time. We had to leave because of the revolution. We lived in Dubai for a little while. And I look at that now in the context of the multidimensional field agent role that I play as more like imprinting. I needed to have that as like in my files, so to speak, early in life. But then we moved back to the States. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, south of Buffalo, New York, had a very conventional upbringing, school, sports, the whole deal. And then in about 2008, 9, my father became ill. And everyone was like, he's going to beat the cancer. He had it 40 years before he beat it then. And I got a direct transmission that came down. It was like it came from some other dimensional space. And it was, he will not be staying. And I just knew that to be true. So I rearranged my schedule to be with my father during that time and ended up helping to midwife him home, right, to cross over. His childhood friend who had died 6 months before, I could perceive him in the hospital room a couple hours before he left. And I just knew Gary's here for dad. And then my dad started to show up after he had transitioned. And I was like, I must miss my dad. I'm kind of imagining things. But then other beings started showing up and talking to me. And then I started getting interested as a hobby. I thought just a side hobby. I have an anthropology background, interdimensional Sasquatch beings. And I thought, this is weird that I'm into this, but whatever. Maybe I'm bored. And then I realized, well, there's either mass hallucination on the planet because of all the eyewitness accounts all over the world, or there really is something to this phenomenon. And then I had interdimensional Sasquatch visitors come to me one night in 2012 and say, you have important tasks ahead of you and you're not doing them. Like you're not fulfilling what you're supposed to be doing here. And I was kind of like, great, but I don't know what those are, right? So it kind of went from there. And then I was prompted by my own spirit guides to put out a shingle for being a spirit medium. Made me want to throw up at the time because, you know, I was a skeptic. I was like, this stuff isn't real. But I'd been living kind of this double life, like all this stuff was going on. And at the time I was running a consulting company doing like organizational development and fundraising and community development. And so I started doing readings blind anonymously and people were getting a lot of healing. So I moved forward with that. And then pretty soon I was channeling people's spirit guides and they were like, you're a healer. You need to be doing your soul purpose work on the planet. And they're like, oh, I met this person in meditation, or this was my pretend friend when I was little. And I was like, wow, okay, so this is a thing. 2016, the Arcturians got a hold of me. I had never heard of them. I just kept hearing the word. I looked it up. I'm like, oh, that's a thing, right? And at the time I joked, as if I wasn't weird enough, we're going to take this even weirder. So everything went galactic at that time. And I'd been interacting with the interdimensional Sasquatch people. I love hiking and camping. So I was always out in the wilderness. And we began having experiences as a family with them. I have lots of those stories. They're beautiful. Fast forward to today as a multidimensional field agent, I do a lot of portal work, Stargate work, grid work, and way beyond the planet even. And so I work a lot with the interdimensional Sasquatch people, the little people as well, helping them with their projects. We can talk all about that if you want. So Arcturians, went to an Arcturian conference, got assigned to go to the south of France, to Bougarache. One of the guys there came over and told me I needed to go, and I just knew, okay, I got to go there. I turned 40 in 2016, spent 3 weeks in the south of France doing all this work, only later, much later, to find out that's where the 12th Stargate on the planet is. So basically, I spent this life starting to travel all over the planet to these sites. Went to Egypt in 2017 for particle convergence mission, ended up in the Great Pyramid during the solar eclipse, during that window, doing major work. Got on the bad side of some, negative aliens, had to learn how to deal with all of that. And it's been kind of this fast moving train all the way up until about 2018, 19. We're talking like Ark of the Covenant trip, call it that. I was like, what? Okay, what am I, Indiana Jones now? But I just knew I had to do it. And other people would be like, I know I'm supposed to be on this trip. We would all convene, we do the work, and then we all fly home. Did that for a good 5 years. Then, even by my standards, things got pretty weird. In 2021, I had light craft show up over my home in Montana, which was not something they would do. Minus, give or take a power up here or there after I did work. But they were literally flying over the home and flashing really bright. And there was this whole thing that unfolded where it was like, you can go home now. And I was trying to make sense of it. I was like, is this going to be a walk-in? Are we? And make a long story short, we arranged a pickup. We were going to go to Antares. So I was like, great, we'll be some of the first people to leave, come back. I don't know. I'm up for it. Let's go. I just knew we were supposed to follow this thread. I mean, yeah, believe me, I had some doubts too. That's no small thing, right? And this is actually the first time I'm publicly talking about it. And I'm being told it's okay to talk about it now. And lo and behold, leading up to that date that we set in the summer of 2021, we had US Black Ops helicopters flying over the house. We had stuff coming over late at night. We had UFOs showing up. And the night of, there was a huge explosion in the sky. It looked almost like a nuclear explosion way high up. And I just thought, that can't be good. And so we waited. And then I was told to go up to the Glacier portal. I work a lot with that portal in Glacier, Montana, the park. And we were in the Whitefish Lodge. This is a great story for this show. Okay. So we're in the lodge having dinner, been up there numerous times before and done a lot of work, even from that place. And I overlay. My daughter was with me at the time, and she calls it mission mode. She knows what this is like, right? So she's familiar with it, and she has sight too, so she can perceive. And I had an entourage of regressives show up, and they said, you're a worthy adversary. Here are the new terms. We're willing to accept our timeline adjustments, and laid a contract or a treaty in front of me. And I, my human's like, well, this is weird. And I'm checking in with my 7D team. They're like, go ahead, sign it. I'm right-handed. My left hand came up and I signed it in light language. They left. Kind of went, whoa, all right. I think I'm just going to go use the restroom. I need a break. This is so weird. It's not weird from the higher self, but the human has to adjust. I go to the restroom and there's a woman coming out. It was a divine appointment. She got a whole message, a whole activation. She told me 3 days ago, she lives in Florida, UFO showed up over my house and they told me to be here. So this is my life, right? Divine appointment, intrigue, do all this stuff. Now, make a long story short, I basically on some level agreed to play the patsy, but it was like a double agent kind of thing. Like at this human level, I really thought okay, this is going to be this pickup, this whole thing. Higher level was like, you're playing the patsy, you're playing the fool. And so it's intrigue. So we can bring them in, and there was obviously some sort of warfare. And now your timelines are being renegotiated. So fast forward after that, I have to say there was part of me that was like, time out, because this is a lot for my human. And I demanded that my team give me more information about what the hell I was involved in. I had been willing, from France after the Ark of the Covenant trip, and what was that, 18, 19, I flew solo to Kauai, dropped codes in Waimea Canyon, all the stuff, right? I've been just follow the directives, make it happen. But that was so extreme that I was like, I'm not doing anything else until I get more information about what all this is. And so that's when the Voyagers material showed up. I don't know if you've seen this document, but Ashley and Nadine brought it through. It's like 500 pages in 2002, I think, or one. And I was like, oh, this is what I've been up to. It's all in here. It's an Indigo Type 1, and we do a bunch of field work. And in piecing it together now with all the updates she's done since then, and the Ascension glossary run by Lisa Renee, Energetic Synthesis. They kind of bring through very similar information. So I can cross-check. Essentially, what happened was in 8-9, our grid started to get whacked and a different kind of ascension had to be called. The organic Mashianic ascension with stellar activation cycles got so tampered with, and there's a much, much bigger story there. That's not really like my wheelhouse. I would go to their material for all of that. I'm just like the field agent who deals with it on the ground, right? And so all of that got called, and then they woke all of us up who have this stealth mission, right? Who have self-coding to be able to deal with this. And the Yanas, outside the time matrix, outside the universe, if you will, this one that we're in, can come now directly down through. That's why when I deal with a lot of regressive groups in my field work, they're always like, who the hell are you and where'd you come from? They're not used to, this level of being able to correct, restore the living architecture, and the blueprints and the templates is essentially what we're doing. So for your listeners, what happened is I kind of went from being Eesha Andromeda in the public, told in 2021, change your last name legally to Love, which I did, moved to North Carolina in 2022, let everything go, went back to my source self, remembering. And then they were like, okay, a year later, like, we need you back out in the public again. Part of me just wanted to stay on the mountain, I'll admit, It's like, this is awesome up here. And come back out, because now fail-safe ascension is moving very quickly at this time. And I can go into more detail about what I've been up to recently, as recent as May, and all these transmissions they had me bring through called Higher Love Alchemy. And it's massively shifting and helping people purge shadow and all that. So I kind of went from Galactica, like the local neighborhood and all of that, to, really working through this beautiful stairway of creation, downstepping. I work a lot with the flame of Amareya to bring through in the Trigate and the Trinity and source plasma flows. And I can talk extensively about that. But that's it in a nutshell. It was a fast-moving awakening that I tried to stay, in sync with, which, some of it was graceful, some of it was pretty bumpy, And you can imagine have a pretty big target on me. I have a lot of protection, but I've also had to learn, how to watch my perimeter and all of that. And it's, what's to be spoken now, because definitely a channel, is the discernment piece. So just because we say extraterrestrial, it doesn't mean enlightened or evolved or not service to self. There are a lot of agendas playing out. I just joke, like, take our political scene on the planet and just extrapolate. And then you have a pretty good idea of like, yeah, the same shit, different planet, different star system, right? And yet now I serve like everyone. I serve all the Galactics, all the Interdimensionals. Everyone has a chance to ascend at this time. And so the last thing I would just wrap up with is I work directly with the Emerald and Amethyst orders and the Emerald Covenant, which is the agreement that was made to maintain evolutionary pathways for all life. And I am ardently passionate about that.
Wow, what a journey. Incredible. And also, Eesha, we share a lot of similarity, even in the timing of certain things. So for me, the Arcturians came through in 2015. Then in 2016, I went to Egypt. So there's a lot of similarities in some of those flows. And they always say that we're always working together as a team. Even if you and I are just connecting now for the first time, there would have been syncs in the past where if we were to step through each of our histories, we'd realize that so much of our work probably was interwoven without us knowing it.
That's right. I liken it to a chessboard, like everything's moving around. And, before we started the recording, I was telling you I get moved around. I get field assignments. And so it's kind of like based on what's needed where. And I often don't even know until about 4 weeks before. So absolutely. What I've seen is a lot of us are super synced up from like 7D, and then we're all running our different assignments down here. And then we're definitely in a convergence for us now to be coming together like this. And there really is a massive shift underway right now that is allowing a completely different rubric and paradigm. I don't know if you caught it, but last week on This Morning, a British chat show, the Arcturian starseed made her debut. And I had a jaw-dropping moment and said out loud to my daughter, I think we're here. I think we got to this place, which is a little shocking for my human, right? For us, it's the opposite. We're shocked when the mainstream collective starts to talk about what we've been exposed to for a long time, you know?
Yeah. If you recall, I don't actually know how many years ago this happened, but Kanye West came out and said that he was a starseed. I think he went into a psychiatric ward or something like that. This was years ago. So we've come a really long way from that moment, where we are now.
In a very short amount of time.
What's her name? Willow Smith has been talking about this forever. You know, when she was a kid. I remember going on her Instagram profile years ago and she had starseed on her bio. She's changed it now. I mean, she's, gone through stages of evolution. But every once in a while, I check her Insta to see what she's up to. And it's interesting. Like, I recall, back in 2015 when I went through, and you can probably relate to this as well, nobody was talking about this. Like, when I had my first experience of going multidimensional and accessing the 13th dimension and then meeting my 7D starship and all of that stuff, no one was talking about it. And nowadays, you turn on the news, you're seeing all of this just there in broad daylight. So I think we are nearing a precipice of revelation. And I come at it from the disclosure perspective as well. So I've got one foot in both realms at the moment. I've got the Ascension side and then I've got the disclosure side, which has come in more recently for me. And I'm seeing it on both angles. I'm really seeing it on both angles. So that's the convergence coming in, the sort of scientific community, because I'm having conversations with people like Avi Loeb, Harvard professor, and people from the California University of Noetic Sciences, the college. So I see this coming in from academic angles, from the ufology space, from the Ascension space. I feel like there's definitely a moment of convergence, as you said, that's really coming and making itself known. Now, Eesha, you mentioned a lot in your story as you took us through. There was a lot there, and I just want to unpack a couple of small pieces of that today, just so we can really enlighten our audience as to the experience of being at this level of multidimensionality. Because, for you and I, this is normal everyday stuff, but for people out there, I just want to break it down a little bit. So one of the things that you did mention, you mentioned templates, grids, portals, stargates. Even that in and of itself is a big topic. But can you break it down? When you go to, say, places like Egypt, or when you get sent on these missions, just tell us a little bit about what is that experience like for you? What do you do? How does that unfold?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. So I think it's important for people to understand that Earth has a special role in that from Earth, you can transit up through the universal Stargate. So all the wars fought on Earth throughout history have been wars over Templar, okay? The Templar of the planet and Stargates, and access and dominion and control of them. So Stargate 4 is in Egypt. There's been a lot of conflict over that one. Stargate 10, of course, in the Middle East, in the UK, and then the 12th in the south of France. And there's a lot you can do from that 12th Stargate. So they've had me, that's the main one I go to. I was just there in December doing major work with the flame of Amarea. So that's important to know. And then with the incoming ascension flows and their source plasma flows and white rainbow plasmas that are coming through the system, down through the system now, think of it like that's a macro of our micro. So our micro has a heart that pumps out and then it comes back in. That's the design of living creation, right? So, but we've had hijackers who've used really advanced technology. They're even 11D creator beings, and they refracted source flows and have done all sorts of very interesting things to create fallen systems that then the quantum is finite and then it becomes a parasitic system. All of that is getting reclaimed. And I specialize in helping those beings. I know them very well. I understand their mentality very well. It's a separation consciousness. They forgot their source. That's all. Everyone deserves to go home. So there's no good and bad guys in my world, right? At this point, no polarity drama. So I'll take it out of like the esoteric and give you a few examples. So when you've got incoming frequencies and you're accreting frequency and you're shifting upwards, my daily meditation that's free on my YouTube channel, for example, people will often get dizzy. They'll sometimes get headaches. Sometimes they purge because it's like a detox. So in December of 2022, they had me fly solo, got 2 weeks notice, if that, put the trip together, we need you there, to basically do grid work and portal work to prepare those grids, because what I was shown, I basically hired a driver, drove the whole length of Egypt, did a whole bunch of work, flew home. And as I flew back to Cairo, and as I was flying, they were having me finish the project. It's kind of like if you surge a bunch of electricity into a grid system that has a lot of disconnections and disrepair, that whole system won't be able to come online in the same way. So there's some micro-regional work like that. On the other hand, North Carolina was interesting. They had me stationed on the side of Silo Mountain at the top of the Black Mountains. The bottom of the Black Mountains is Mount Mitchell, the tallest mountain on the East Coast. And we had some regressive ETs that had basically punched holes all the way down the East Coast, including at that spot, to pull things into Phantom Matrix. Okay. So then they have me go and they have me shut that down, clear the huge entities out of there, repair all of that, bring source flows through, open the tri-gate. It's a big repair, and then negotiate with beings. Like, there are a lot now that are turning because they're realizing it's futile to continue to try to do your self-serving agenda. You might as well think about coming home. It's not dissimilar from a lot of the, I think, conflict and war negotiations we see on the surface of Earth. It's just, they just have, some evolved technology like messing with timelines and things like that, So those are two different examples of just kind of cleaning up things up. Sometimes not sometimes, I can hear my team laughing at me. Sometimes, like all of the time, I'm always met with like a challenger or someone who's used to, like, a being, entity, group, whatever, that's used to having power, dominion. And so that gets handled in several different ways. They're given an option to go home. If they challenge too much, they're just taken, things like that, But a lot of the times now, it's like, you've had your time. This is all shifting. You got to find your way forward. What I would like people to understand about regressive races is that they are caught kind of like in the First Order? Is that what it's called in Star Wars? Ironically, I was so not into like Star Trek-y anything growing up. It's so ironic that this is my life.
I literally had this conversation last night with a bunch of friends, and they were talking about Star Wars and Star Trek, and I was like, given what I do for a job, I don't know anything about it. So I'm the last person to ask on that.
Yeah. Well, so it's essentially the stormtroopers, that's what they're called, right? They're stuck in the ranks. And so they're used to being expendable pawns, and it's a very hierarchical dog eat dog kind of culture. So they're having to figure out a whole new way to be as this ascension process unfolds, and that they can evolve. There are treaty negotiations. There's all sorts of stuff. There's different groups. But what I can feel in the field right now, because now I'm dropping down back in a little bit. A lot of the work I do is like, I was just in the Hall of Cosmetus with a virtual clinic that I run for metaphysicians who can come together and do this teamwork. And we were working across a vast landscape that goes way beyond just even our universe, right? So now as I come back into the local, let's call it exopolitics, what I can sense is we have a bunch of different groups that it's almost like they're dealing with old information. They've had plans for a long time, almost like I can see their focus has been really narrow, really myopic. And I was told before I got on today that a lot of our transmission today was for the ETs. It's not for humanity per se. They're all listening. And your time to shift and begin to remember a much greater self and a collective and a possibility is upon you. And all these pathways are opening up. And the extent to which you want to continue to play war games, that's like the diminishing returns. And so there's something really big shifting as we're talking about this. I can feel it. It's going way beyond where they thought they were even going with their projects.
What is the highest vision of all of this, in your opinion?
I was just being given it because I'm like, whoa, that's new. The reason why many beings engage in power over other conflicts is because on some level, they manipulated their ability to ascend. And the fear is that they don't deserve to go home. They don't deserve to ascend. That's the core shadow of all regressive groups, period.
And humans would be included in that.
Absolutely. And humanity is not like, it's like the Star Wars bar. It's like, we got a lot of stuff going on here, right? A lot of different beings incarnate, right, in human form. And we have a lot of different human hybrids that were created from different groups, again, as pawns. But the pawns are waking up and realizing, I don't want to be used as a pawn. I don't want to be an expendable pawn anymore. So there's a lot moving and a lot shifting. So the end game is like the whole sector is being reclaimed. And the reason it went failsafe is because there was so much potential for a huge fall of a very large scape of living creation that it just was like, no. And the immune system response kicked in and, we're doing something different. So what I'm sensing now is it's almost like I'll try to take it out of, because I realize not everybody has the touchstones that I do from doing this work. I'll take it out of that. And like at the end of World War II, it would be as if we can help you rebuild. And it would be as if the group went, no, we have to continue our warring ways. We can't rebuild and become what Germany has become. And so that's what's had now. There's a whole story about the breakaway German civilization and how that's all gone on the planet. Look up Jason Rice on Gaia TV. That's what I was guided to do. They had me review all that material a couple of years ago. They're like, here's the deal. You need to understand if they go with the staged invasion plan, this is kind of the rinse and repeat pattern they've used with the real deal of what happened after World War II. That's helpful. Local history to understand the secret space program and why all that tech went semi-corporate and who kind of ran that and yada, yada. But in this time frame of vast ascension flows, accelerated ascension flows, waves, you could call them, I think we are going to be blown away, mind blown about what is possible. Mm-hmm. And when you consider the incredible love of source, love is the ultimate foundation of all, and miracles are created there. So in my recent meditations and events, we have embodied the source self, and people are telling me about like miracles, right? It took me forever to get this paperwork done. And then all of a sudden, all the resistance was gone. And so that's a lot of what I encourage people is disclosure is an inside job. The multidimensional self is here. We've got different aspects in different star systems, and we can get into that. But ultimately, you are source. And if you let everything else drop away and you let the source emanation come through, there's a whole different reality unfolds from within. So it's less about outside of us enlightening us about the larger picture. And this goes for all the galactics as well. Every race of being can do this and drop the identity construct. My Arcturian aspect is called the Lotus Keeper. So this will be the Arcturian Lotus Keeper. And he's remembering I'm source. And this all falls away, the identity construct, and that oneness is restored. So to answer you, that's a long answer to your question. And it's landing on a final statement of, I don't know, you show us what's possible now. We're doing it.
I love that.
That's why it's like so exciting to be incarnate at this time,
And I love that you've brought in, I think this is an important piece for our viewers and listeners as well, is that, typically we talk about ascension and galactic contact as something that humans do. But I've received a very similar message as well, is that many races are ascending, it's not just us, that the concept of ascension ripples out through the galaxy, through the universe, through the multiverse, because of that process of evolution. It doesn't matter if you're reptilian, Arcturian, Pleiadian, Andromedan, or human, we're all going through the journey of evolution. And discernment is something we talk a lot about on this channel. We've touched it in many different ways on many different episodes, because it's so important for people to know that the second you channel a being, the second you connect with something, it doesn't mean you should immediately assume that it's at that state of consciousness, because there's just so much out there. And also, don't let that be an aspect of fear. Use your inner discernment the same way that you would on planet Earth. You won't go down a shady alleyway here on Earth that there's dodgy people in there. Like same deal. You go out there in the multiverse, have your wits about you,
That's it. And when I invite people to explore their multidimensional self, I always say with the caveat of set it love or above, right?
Yeah.
For the highest good of all involved. And then, their healing abilities become your healing abilities. And then you radically can evolve a human template here, which is a whole nother area I'm really passionate about. One last thing to touch on with regressives and all that. So I'll get a lot of defectors, who will come to me and they seek amnesty and quarantine, just again, not dissimilar to what we see on the surface here. So it's a big landscape and it's moving. But, if I had talked to you even a year ago, we would have spent, I think, a lot more time in that zone. And now as of, here we are late June of 2024, and so much has transpired in the last couple of months as part of, the plasmas coming through the sun and the ascension, the greater ascension flows that we're in, that we are just not, we're rebuilding, we're restoring, we're resurrecting. It's a magical time in a way that I've been joking, like it's been an eon. I mean, this just doesn't happen. Failsafe just doesn't get called like this very often. So it's like really unique to get to.
I want to go into that. I think that's a really important topic to touch upon, because two things that are coming into this. One is what you mentioned before about people still having old information. I think that rippling effect is still going on, and I see that. And I look at it and I go, but don't you realize it's shifted? And no, people don't realize it's shifted. And the failsafe, they've said it to me in different words. They haven't used that specific word with me, but they basically said ascension is inevitable. Same concept, right? So there's this idea that's come in more recently where it's happening. That's it. It's happening. There's no two ways about it. And I want us to discuss why this is important, how this has come about, and what that means for especially the leaders moving forward. Because one of the things that's come through for me is that those of us who were scared to speak up because we've had trauma in past lives or whatever, Lemurian times or other planets, galaxies, other planetary wars, for people who felt like they couldn't speak up for fear of persecution or fear of something happening to them, because of this failsafe, as you call it, in place, that's no longer something to be worried about. So tell us about that. Why have they brought this in? What does it mean for us? And especially, what does it mean for the leaders moving forward in their ability to go to that next level?
Yeah. So they want to start, like, and I say they, it's we. I take the me and I flip it up to the we, right? So we want to start with the very specific question you asked, because it's a very germane one right now that is important, which is you can safely move forward in new constructs because the old power constructs are being dismantled. I just did remote field work with an evolutionary client today, for example, on Monaco, and we completely dismantled. It was actually AI. It wasn't even negative entity. Okay. And what I was shown is all those people in that rubric now can feel like they can repurpose a lot of their energy and resources in ways that serve humanity. Whereas before, it was almost like, we have to do it this way. This is what I do. And I compete and I compare and it's like very siloed. So a lot of that is being dismantled. And, I'm being told right now that this conversation, for example, is a marker. And from this point forward, we'll look back and we'll be able to see with hindsight how everything has shifted on the other side of a lot of the failsafe ascension. So now let me back up. Tamper-proof ascension got called after so many different stellar activation cycles, 25,000 years and some change, got messed with. And the neighboring universe time matrix, I think they're twice fallen. There's some really gnarly stuff. Okay. Like we think, we got bad stuff flying around in the skies. Then you go into like the formless stuff. And they started to grid whack and try to take down a larger portion of living creation. And that's when it got called. But the metaphor I've used is a little bit of rot in your garden. You're like, we got a little rot, but it starts to take over the whole garden. You kind of like, this defeats the purpose of garden. What are we doing here? And that's the way to think about this. We're talking like, things dark flowering, things going really, really parasitic, if you will. So that's why it got called 8, 9, 08, 09, several events, and higher councils got involved. And they finally, from way beyond even our local universe, realized, okay, this is unacceptable and this has to be remedied, right? I mean, I don't think living creation was created to just then be all inverted and reversed and go to crap, right? So kind of like here, right? A little bit of, I don't know, mud in your house. You're like, I'll deal with that later. But you know what? It takes over the whole floor. You're like, whoa. No. Okay.
That's a product of free will, right? Like because of the free will, this is how everything's gotten muddied, right?
Yeah. And an extreme exploration of separation consciousness.
Yes.
And then where a lot of the collectives, and I know because sometimes I wake up from dreams where I'm like really arguing for a certain line of action in a council meeting, where we got to is the Emerald Covenant is so evolutionary pathways have to be maintained because at a certain point without undue negative interference. And I had a long conversation with the Amethyst Order about this because free will. I was like, well, we can't tamper with free will. It's just free will. And they said, yeah, but when you incarnate, you can use your free will to do what you can do. And I went, oh, that's the workaround. That's beautiful, right?
That's why the whole concept of star seeds and all of that, indigos. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. The Blue Azurite security team, Templar security team. In 1819, I was at a hot springs in Montana getting a facial. And I didn't know any of this bigger context then. And out of nowhere, right, the reality again superimposes. And I've got a blue-skinned being standing over me with a technician by him. And they're talking, could she handle it? And he said, yes, go ahead. And they did something, which I realized later was they changed the angular rotation of my particle spin. And so I asked him his name. He said, Yanni. I didn't have any context. So I was like the musician, what? No. And I sort of walked out of there. I was very disoriented, trying to adjust to, this new reality that they had just shifted me into. And then later, of course, what I learned is it's the Yanni Ascended Masters, right? So, this all tracks. It's all there. We have tremendous support at this time. And what I would really petition everyone to do is to take your own vertical relocation to heart. So, the revolution is an inside job, and different powers that be have done an amazing job of polarizing people and keeping people in conflict and polarity dramas and distracted. If we just let all that go and went into the third way and started to activate, I knew when my 8-part transmission series on my YouTube channel in May started with a monadic activation, I was like, whoa, okay, this is getting to a whole new level. So we have our soul, oversoul, and then 12 oversouls, the monadic, right? And so reconstituting the multidimensional self and then displacing and being able to work from within your own structure here, it starts to get very different. And that's anything to distract us from that, because you can't tamper with that. I mean, that's all coming from within your own reality field. So that's what I invite people to do, is really live the virtues, honesty, integrity, do your shadow work. I can't say enough about that. After, I spent a lot of time dancing around and all the fun, far out stuff. And it really wasn't until 2021, 22 that I really got into shadow work and realized how much the ancestral lines, shame and trauma and all that I'd been sitting on. And so, I like to think of it like, yes, we have a soul and spirit that animates a body. And a lot of starseeds think of the body as a throwaway. It's like the meat sack. Recently, we've really been reminding ourselves nothing could be further from the truth. This is an incredible design. It was designed for ascension, full body ascension. And the body has its own consciousness. And when it feels like it doesn't have a seat at the table and it's just being dragged along, it doesn't make the greatest team player. In some ways, it's kind of like soul is rider and body is horse. And can we reassure the horse and work with it in harmony? And I just did a session earlier today with somebody in France, and that's exactly what we did. And we couldn't get over how integrated she felt at the end and how in harmony she felt, and how the body now is prepared for what I think is going to be some really interesting potential portal Stargate transit. For those of us who have done that work, have really cleaned this up, you should be able to walk through portals. You don't need a spacecraft. You can open them with your own set of coding. I have a really fun story about that I could tell,
Please tell us. Yeah.
So 2021 was a big year. It was summer solstice in June, built a fire outside, and I was sitting by the fire by myself, and from the wood line, a female Sasquatch called out. And I was like, oh, right. What did I agree to do on some other level, right? And they needed coding. So I can share codes, and then they can transit through portal systems, almost like lock and key, right? Encryption. So I gave them the codes, and then I was told to go watch Gladiator, which I thought was really weird, but I learned not to question my guidance. So I watched it, and I was so moved and expanded at the end of that movie. It was 11 o'clock at night. I went out under the starlit sky, and I felt completely merged with source, with all that is. And I just threw out my arms and said, I am home. And a portal opened over me. And I heard all these Sasquatch people teleport onto the property. I could hear all the sticks breaking. And then they all left. They all transited up and out. And I was kind of in awe. And then this blinking being came down over me and said, don't forget to close the portal. I thought, oh, right, probably should do that. And then this interesting validation of metaphysician colleague said, my housemate asked me recently, are all the Sasquatch leaving the planet? And I'm like, okay. So the interdimensionals that I work with, like the Sasquatch people and the little people, I love them. They let me call them my groupies. They're like, follow me around and, fix all their stuff for them. And they're able to do this. They're transiting now. Their portal systems and are getting fixed, things that have been in disrepair for a long time. So this is a precursor to what we should be able to do as well. Now, I recognize that as I talk about this is totally what I do in the field. And there's still a part of my human self that's like, well, seeing will be believing. And yet my team right now is pointing out, did you see the interview on the morning chat show last week?
Yeah.
Did you see the movie? I'm like, right. Did you see the soft launch they're doing with disclosure? And them letting people know we've been in touch with Galactics for a long time? Like, right. And I have been prepared for this time. They said, we need you out in front. We need you helping people navigate these times because, like we know, when the Cartesian worldview implodes, psychic safety can go with it. So different client session today, what was explained is as much stability as we can hold, because a traumatized population cannot devote a lot of time to ascension and spirituality when you're in trauma brain,
And that comes to like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I talk about this a lot too, where if you're at those lower levels where you're just struggling to get by, if you don't have, this is where the abundance stuff comes in. And I've seen on your website, you work with that as well. You need to get that stuff sorted because in order to devote your life to spirituality and ascension, you got to have the basics, the foundation, the traumas. And I'm so glad that you brought this up because people seem to, I've met some people along my journey who want to go almost as an escapism, like, oh, I want to go out there. I want to go up there because they think it'll feel better. And I say, well, how are you going to get there without letting this other stuff go? It's like shackles holding down your aura,
Yeah, the spiritual bypass is so tempting, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. No, we're far better off to turn and face our shadow and integrate all of our wounded motivation and do this beautiful cleanup here. It's an amazing opportunity we all have to clean house, So I've been through extreme initiations when it comes to having to face fears, and we don't have modern mystery schools, so we do it with things like finances and deconstructing your entire family, your marriage, like all of that, right? And I wouldn't recommend it if you haven't been initiated into that. It could be catastrophic for people. So there is what I definitely felt earlier today is there is this attenuation happening. And so, when I think back, was it 2020? COVID hit everything. I was running Friday YouTube lives to help stabilize the field. Things like that. Kind of like I'm seeing the ship that crosses the English Channel with the stabilizers. If it gets rocking and rolling too much, everybody's puking, they can't enjoy the journey, right? It kind of defeats the purpose. So yes, there are agendas that are trying to cultivate a lot of chaos at this time. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Come back in, cultivate your inner peace, get yourself grounded, get yourself vertically relocated, and then you'll be up and above the fray. You don't have to be in it. Another conversation recently, you can entrain down with all the downward spiral, or you can be an entrainment influence by holding the upward spiral.
You know how I said at the start, we have a lot of similarities. So 2020, I also got guided to stop doing other stuff and I started doing Friday transmissions every Friday afternoon. So just it's little things like that. And also you mentioned about your connection with the lotus. So my ninth dimensional starship, the Arcturians, is blue with a white lotus, 9-petaled lotus. So this is what I mean, like the synchronicities that are starting to come through at this moment in time. It still makes me smile every time. I do a lot of these interviews and every time I feel like our soul families is coming closer and closer together for this convergence. Eesha, it's been so beautiful having you on the show and you've shared so much with us today. So many different pieces have come through and beautiful transmissions as well. With our final few minutes, what transmission would you like to bring through for the humans and also what you feel needs to go out into the multiverse at this time?
I'm taken right back to a trip I was guided to in 2019 outside of Sedona into the Painted Desert. And it was to pick up what message does humanity want to remember at this time. And it's the same one. Love is our birthright, not fear. And while we've normalized fear here, that's not the foundation of reality. Love is the truth. Love is the foundation. It's not a trite saying. It is the most powerful state you can put yourself in, is to connect to universal love. And that clears everything else. And you can regenerate yourself. You can, do all the healing from that place. It doesn't have to be complicated. So that's what I really want to invite everybody back into, is you were always love. You will always be love. And if you let everything else drop away, that's what can come through now, and completely rearrange your life in ways that create so much greater balance and harmony. And you deserve that, because it is your birthright. You do not have to do anything to attain it or to be worthy of it.
That's so beautiful. And Eesha, where can people find you if they want to connect with you more?
You can find me at multidimensionalyou.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Eesha, for being on the show. And to all of our listeners, viewers, we deeply thank you for following this beautiful work. We're at such a critical time in humanity's evolution and ascension. If you enjoyed today's message and interview, please give us a like, subscribe, share. This helps us get the message out to more beautiful souls. Thank you for today's episode of First Contact, and we'll see you guys next time.